We now have our brother, Onyekachi, who is going to put this matter of Mau Mau justice, Mau Mau fight for the liberation of Kenya, into the overall African context. So you can see that there are many, many similarities, and it's all, in fact, one war.
Thank you. I'm here today in solidarity with the Mau Mau Justice Network on behalf of the organisation that I work with, which is called the African Remembrance Day. And I intend to keep the talk simple and short, but I wanted to deal with issues of impunity and the way the work that we do with African Remembrance Day is to highlight the wrong that has been done to victims of enslavement, of colonialism, of empire, and to link those to the struggles of the victims of the Kenyan land wars. There are similarities, and very quickly what I will do is talk about, first of all, I'll remind everybody here, I think we know what the purpose of slavery, what the purpose of colonialism and empire was. Secondly, to talk very quickly about the crimes of slavery, colonialism and empire. And then to talk about the defeat and retreat of empire and slavery, and that to then be followed by compensation. And there's a pattern consistently of compensation for those who committed crimes during slavery, colonialism and empire. And then finally to talk about the battles for justice, including compensation and a hearing for the victims of those who suffered. When we started Remembrance Day in '95, there was a reason. There was a sense that millions of people, depending on who you talk to, the most conservative figures were 2 million, but some African scholars, Sheikh Diop, estimated the figures as high as 50 million, others accept 20 million. Most comfortable figures that most people are comfortable with are around 10 million. But millions of Africans perished during the period of enslavement to the West, and we felt that those victims had gone. They had disappeared, they were thrown overboard in the ships, nobody had said prayers, nobody had remembered. I mean, people have remembered them as part of the struggle, but there were no commemorations for those victims, and we felt that we wanted to have a day, and we chose August the 1st because it's Emancipation Day in the Caribbean, to remember them and to say prayers and do some of the things that we should have been doing all along. And we got Bernie Grant, who was involved with the African reparations movement, who came out in support of the Remembrance Day. And the reparations movement was obviously something that the AU had launched through a group of, and supported by a politician who won the Nigerian presidency in '93, I think it was, Abiola, to seek reparations for all the damage that had been done during this period of slavery and colonialism. So we launched it in '95, and I think it's significant that '95 happened because the year before, obviously the massive changes that happened in South Africa. And when I spoke to people, they said, well, why is it only now that you're remembering? Why is it only now that this has become an issue? And the best answer that I was able to come up with was that it seemed that for about 400 years, constitutionally, in any case, others that have the power to define in legal texts the inferiority and to institutionalize the inferiority of Africans, and this has gone on for a very long period, and there have been lots of sites of struggle around the world, before people were enslaved, before on the boats, on the plantations, and then we had the heroic antics of all the maroon movements in the New World, and then finally in Haiti, where there was a fight back and freedom was grasped in the Haitian Revolution. And then we moved forward, and every time the project was to win liberation and remove this indignity, and then we went from there to the abolition of slavery after the uprisings in the English-speaking Caribbean, to the fights in America with the Civil War to liberate, and then after you're liberated from enslavement, there's a new civil rights struggle, and you see this process, and it's one fight after another, and each time you have to remove the indignity in front, and you can't look back and mourn the victims. And this continues, and it ends, this period of what I call the era of enslavement, of second-class inferiority in constitutions in '94, effectively. And so it is this moment that I think we begin, leading up to this, to begin to look back and say, oh my God, what happened? Who did we lose? Who did we, what happened in this? And it was important to recognize this, because we started going around the country with Remembrance Day, and people would say, oh, this was so long ago. And you would say, well, no, actually, it wasn't. This phase has just ended. And the victims now need to be heard. And we went around to different parts of the country. We went to Manchester. Every time we invited the local dignitaries, so the Lord Mayor would come up. And we would say the prayers, we did the ceremony, and I would have a question for them, which is, why is it in this city, everywhere you look in Bristol, there are monuments to people who owned slaves all over the place, and nothing to the victims. What is going on here? And invariably, you would have this moment of, people would go red, and we knew at that point that something was going to be done by the state, and we saw that in 2007, about 10 years later, when we had this year commemorating the slave enslavement, and in the end it was a way of the state trying to manage what was an outrage, and in the end it became a celebration of Wilberforce. And again, the victims were forgotten. And for us, the victims are very important, and we have to keep talking about this. And my talk about the victims has to do with this issue of impunity. There was a film that came out in 2009 called Mugabe and the White African, and it was a very powerful moving film about what has been going on in terms of the land conflicts in Zimbabwe. And the focus was on a white family who apparently had bought their land quite legally after, and they were not part of the land that was stolen in the years under colonialism. And there was this whole attempt by members of Mugabe's party to remove them from the land, and we went through, and the cameras were there with them on a day-to-day, and it was very painful to watch. As an individual, you don't want to be put through that. But watching it, most of the Africans in the audience were, at the same time as we were feeling empathy for people going through that, we were aware of the wider context of what was going on. And the fact that many of the people who were watching this in the audience that we were with could not understand that 100 years, 200 years ago, most Africans were going through that when they were dispossessed of their land. And because it's not in a film, people here don't seem to think that those atrocities happened. And so we knew that there was a wider context to this. But what was extraordinary about that was that that family had entered a legal process to try and stop what was happening to them, and they'd gone to the Sadak court, the local regional court in Southern Africa, and the courts had ruled in their favor. And the filmmaker, who was also, I think, providing a commentary, had said that this was the first time that a human right had been recognized in Africa. And at this point, I lost all the empathy for this family, because in 400 years, we'd had probably 9 million people dead in Congo in the 20s. We'd had all the millions that had happened during the slave trade. We'd had the millions in Algeria, all over the continent. We all know the stories. And not one person had been prosecuted. Not one European had paid a price for this. Instead, all those who have committed these crimes, invariably when they start behaving badly, are given compensation. We know that when slavery was stopped in the English-speaking Caribbean, the enslavers were compensated. And the victims were thrown out to remake their world with no tools, no resources, no capital. And we have to go back to what was slavery about? It was about capital, it was about money, it was about, if it wasn't about this, then it was about sadism. And we need to make up our minds which one it was. Was it about, you can half understand that it was about money. If it was just about sadism, then there was something terribly wrong with the people who were doing this. So if it was about money, why is it that those who then behave badly are always compensated? And we hear their story, and the victims, no voice, no stories. And this is a pattern, and it has continued. We know this is part of the anger in Zimbabwe, we know it's been the anger everywhere else. And it's important to talk about one of the first outrages, which is when, the brave and incredible people of Haiti win their freedom. They're surrounded, and after the independence, the French slave owners demanded compensation. Eventually, in 1820, some people won't deal with them until France has approved of it, the rest of the powers. So they want to remove this, and there's a French Charles X demands a payment of independence debt of 150 million gold francs.
Onyekachi, we now got...
Yes, I'm finishing. And that's, which was 10 times the fledgling nation's annual revenue. The original sum was reduced, but Haiti still paid 90 million gold francs, about 11 billion euro in 2010 to France. It was still paying this debt off up until 1947. In 2004, a lawsuit was launched by the Haitians to recover the money that was abandoned when France backed the overthrow of the government. Campaigners argued that the debt was illegal because the original demand for compensation was made and slavery was technically outlawed. And nothing was done. And in 2003, after the Haitians launched this lawsuit and demanded repayment of the money France had extorted from Haiti, the French government responded by being involved in the overthrow of Aristide, who was involved in that process. So what the solidarity that we want to share with the Mau Justice Network is this cry that the voices of the victims of the last 400 years be heard, and the importance that they be compensated for the wrongs that was done to them. And not only the compensation to be going to those who committed the wrongs. And for us it is a very important point, and we will stand in solidarity with you, and as some other infamous criminal said, we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you.
Thank you very much.